Hello and welcome to today's webinar on how social enterprises can help enhance corporate supply chains. We're going to have a little panel discussion in a minute to bring some more insights to you. But it's a really important topic, and we've seen a real commitment to sustainable procurement has been at an all-time high recently, particularly around corporates. And many are moving away from a tick box exercise to really seeing the value that it can add and unlocking value, attracting more talent, investors, and just driving more innovation in supply chain. So many people are turning to social enterprises for these solutions. I'm joined today by Charlie Wigglesworth, who is a Deputy CEO of Social Enterprise UK, Imran Rasool, who's CPO of Nationwide Building Society, and our very own Malcolm Harrison, who's Chief Executive of SIT. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today. Charlie, if I could turn to you first, and if you could help us understand what the current landscape is like with social enterprises and what makes them so unique.
Sure, thanks Emma. Hi everybody. A social enterprise, the one word kind of answer is it's a business which trades for a social purpose. The slightly longer answer is that they are businesses which exist primarily to achieve a social or environmental impact. So they all trade on the open market, they're all selling products or services, but they're doing that with the principal reason of how will that help either achieve a social outcome or an environmental outcome. And if you think of the charity world, for example, in terms of the range of impacts that a charity can have, from a very small community project right up to kind of world peace and global projects, social enterprises follow the same trajectory. So all areas of social and environmental impact and all sorts of business models at all scales. So in the UK, there are around 100,000 social enterprises. They employ about 2 million people and they contribute about 60 billion to the UK economy. So real range, real shapes and sizes, and as I say, all existing for that primary social or environmental purpose, which is their reason for existing, and their business model is just how they go about achieving that.
Great, and we've already mentioned that we're seeing many more social enterprises having a more prominent role in corporate supply chains. And how are Social Enterprise UK helping to shape that? And what are the main drivers really for procurement leaders to get on board with these initiatives?
So in terms of our role, I guess Social Enterprise UK, we're there to be that intermediary, I suppose, between particularly big businesses and their procurement functions and the social enterprises themselves. We started an initiative called the Buy Social Corporate Challenge back in 2016. We launched that at Downing Street with the support of government. Initially with 7 businesses who all committed to looking at how they could spend more with social enterprises. As you say, in terms of kind of the growth in people being interested in this area, we've now got 27 businesses involved in that programme. They spent over £160 million now with social enterprises, with 550 suppliers, created over 2,000 jobs through that work. So we're there really to help both bring forward the social enterprise suppliers and develop them, but also to help to get buy-in from businesses. So how do we help build that business case internally? How do we help for organisations to see kind of the potential that social enterprise has? In terms of kind of where that comes from and what that looks like, I think there's probably kind of 3 main levels at which there's kind of buy-in from businesses. I think the first is at a very strategic level. So as a CPO or as someone leading a procurement function in an upward direction, at an executive level, it's really about kind of demonstrating that the procurement function has a vitally important role to play in sustainability. If you look at any business, its footprint is far more than the people it directly employs or the products it creates. Your supply chain has an enormous impact on what you can do, an enormous influence in how you can do good. So to give an idea of that, the average CSR spend of a FTSE 100 business is about 10 million. The average procurement spend is about 4 billion. So the impact you can have there is very, very great. And I think procurement leaders increasingly are having a conversation around how the procurement function can contribute to that. I think within the procurement team, then there is a really strong line around talent, around people, around attracting the next generation of people to come and work in procurement and see that as an exciting and strong place for them to have a career, and demonstrating that it can be about having an impact and changing people's lives and working with interesting suppliers and so on. And I think that goes right down to an individual level. You know, we've worked over the years with lots and lots of procurement professionals who probably entered a career a few years ago, 20, 30 years ago, thinking that procurement looked in a very different way and was all about price and risk and these things, and actually having the opportunity to, bring their values, bring their kind of culture to work and so on was a really exciting opportunity for them at an individual level as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Imran, if I could bring you in at this point, I know Nationwide have been working with Social Enterprise UK for some time. What was the drivers and what prompted you to Nationwide to get involved with these initiatives?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. And I mean, Charlie makes some really good points actually, and all of those are absolutely true. But if I think back to, as we think back to what brought us into it in the first place, I mean, we first found out about the Bisocial Corporate Challenge after we collaborated with Social Enterprise UK on the Hidden Revolution report published in 2018. And that report looked at the scale and potential of the social enterprise sector as a whole. And we joined the challenge soon after, as it just made so much sense for our organisation. Nationwide's a mutual. We're owned by 15 million of our members, and we're really driven by our social purpose to build society nationwide. So spending with social enterprises just makes so much sense for an organisation like Nationwide, as we can contribute to our social purpose simply by directing purchasing to some of the enterprises through the goods and services that we need to operate. And through some of the partnerships with social enterprises, we can go further to tackle some of the most pressing social environmental issues that are facing our society today, and things that are very pertinent to Nationwide and its members. So things such as homelessness, financial resilience, inequality in society, and climate change, as mentioned previously. So we're really proud to participate in the Bisocial Corporate Challenge and have relationships with social enterprises. What we've done is, connected it with our wider Procurement for Mutual Good programme to deliver social value through our procurement spend, as well as other sustainable initiatives that we're working on.
Excellent. And Malcolm, if we could look at the wider context here, social value, social procurement, the rising up the agenda, what do you think is driving this?
Emma, very good question. And not a sort of simplistic answer either, because I think there's quite a range of factors at play here. I mean, there is definitely some push, be that from governments, regulators, policymakers, legislators, and then there's absolutely some pull from citizens, from consumers who are saying that addressing these issues, addressing issues around social value, around social procurement, they're actually really important to society. They're important to me as a person. I think that really is beginning to have quite a bearing, because policymakers and public sector organizations, private sector organizations are having to sit up and listen to what individuals are saying. I think the public sector have been driving social value agenda for quite some time now. And it is a means to make the public purse work harder. It does drive typically increased local content and local suppliers and local jobs and repurposing of local buildings. And it does, I think, find ways of creatively delivering more value and improving the lives of others as well as addressing issues important for the planet. And I think suppliers soon realize that they're able to differentiate themselves through innovative solutions to solving societal issues. And that's a much better sell, or if you like, it adds weight to the value that you as a supplier are seen to be bringing to your customer. And ultimately, Emma, this is about responsible business, but actually responsible business is good business, and it does create competitive advantage. I think the last thing I'd say on this is a couple of things. Firstly, a lot of this is about sustainability, and businesses are looking to see how they can work towards meeting those UN SDGs sustainability goals, whether that's eliminating poverty, whether that's improving health, creating better education opportunities, driving equality, or building sustainable cities and communities. And I haven't said the word savings once there. And then the local agenda is really important. And it's not just a political one. You know, we all employ people from our local communities. So supporting your local communities is good for you as an organization when it comes to attracting employees. And the last point I would make is if you really want to attract the best talent and the right investors, then you need to put responsible business practices at the heart of what you're doing today.
Absolutely, definitely. Imran, can you give us a little bit more detail on some of the benefits that Nationwide have seen by from some of its partnerships with social enterprises?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're able to contribute towards our social purpose and our mutual good commitments through the social enterprise relationships that we have. So, you know, one of the examples I'll build on that I mentioned earlier is we believe everyone should have a place fit to call home. And we're absolutely committed to tackling homelessness. So there are various social enterprises that support people experiencing homelessness. One example is Change Please Coffee. And Change Please set up a coffee stall within our headquarters in Swindon last year. So if you go there, that's where you get your coffee. And by partnering with them, we're able to provide a service to our people, meanwhile tackling a cause we really care about. Change Please provide counselling, employment, and housing support for people experiencing homelessness through their specialty coffee association. So there's an example there of it fits our social purpose and also helps the enterprise. Another benefit, which Malcolm touched on there, is employee satisfaction, retention and attraction. We're just seeing more and more people want to work for companies and organisations that share their values and where they can make a meaningful difference. We're seeing it firsthand in interviews when people, you know, come to apply for all sorts of roles across the organisation, not just procurement roles, but wider roles in the organisation. You know, the first thing that candidates often ask now is, you know, what are the values? What are the social good things that the organisation is doing, particularly since COVID, and COVID has, you know, sort of impacted so many people over the last year. It's really changed people's views on life in general. And the other area where we've seen the uptick is with the existing colleagues that we have. So our procurement colleagues feel they can really make a difference when they're making buying decisions, you know, to support a social purpose, what they buy, who they buy it from. You know, we've seen it in our internal viewpoint and pulse scores, which are our employee satisfaction scores. You know, these things get commented on. You know, actually individuals are happier and more motivated to be doing work, which is delivering a benefit. And I guess the final area I talk about is around, you know, the diversity of this supply chain can really breed some innovation as well. I mean, many social enterprises work with underrepresented, underprivileged individuals, and that brings new perspectives that allow us to connect with new audiences and adapt for the better of a society as a whole. I mean, one great example we had was we worked with a social enterprise called Ideas Foundation, and Ideas Foundation came up with ideas for our Together Against Hate campaign, which you may have seen on TV and in the media. And Ideas Foundation worked with schools and universities to give young people opportunities to kickstart creative careers, and that's regardless of what school the person went to, what their parents did or do. And some of the students' ideas were so good, we helped them to produce short films for use on social media post that activity. We're really committed to reflecting the diversity of our society across our own workforce and want to do the same across the supply chain. So, you know, social enterprises is, you know, a tool in that toolkit that brings us closer towards that goal.
Excellent stuff.
Yeah. Sorry, can I just add a bit to what both Imran and Malcolm have said, I think, which is that when you look at the drivers for this work, and there are big macro drivers in social value, Malcolm mentioned the SDGs and so on, I think what's really useful about the social enterprise piece specifically within it, and social enterprise is only one small part of a much bigger piece, is that it's an incredibly tangible way of doing this stuff. You know, I think sometimes things like the SDGs, they're very big topics, sustainable procurement and so on. Yeah, how do we approach that? Is it from this lens or this, or and so on? And social enterprises are both a specific way of looking actually across all of those in the different ways in which those businesses operate, but also in the examples that Imran gave there, you know, they are, you know, the coffee shop in the office. They are the things that you can then talk about and explain. And social enterprises are very good at telling the story of the impact that they're having. And sometimes I think that helps people to get it in a way that potentially, you know, your report that talks about how much carbon you've saved in the last year isn't quite as crunchy as a way of telling the story of what you're doing in that area.
Yeah. And Malcolm, I don't know what your views are. I mean, the current climate, I mean, we're just, you know, still battling through coming out of a pandemic. Budgets are tight. Everyone's focusing on perhaps different things. Do you think that, you know, that this would impact how much focus procurement would put on something like this? Or do you actually think that the two marry up? I mean, there's lots of talk about building back better, or since the Black Lives Matter movement, that people have a bigger drive towards ED&I, for instance. What are you hearing from CEOs and CPOs?
Look, Emma, I don't think it's about whether these issues are linked together or not. I actually don't think that matters. They're all important issues in their own right, and therefore they need to get the right focus to address them. What I do sense, and what we are seeing from many of the people that we talk to, is actually the pandemic has further heightened these issues, or how important these issues are on the agenda. And perhaps it's something that Imran said, actually. It's this sort of sense of coming together, the fact that, you know, we've all been in it together, we're all getting through it together, we're doing our bit to build that brighter future. So I think none of that has been quite so important. So there's no doubt for me that the pandemic has accentuated the importance of these issues. Yes, okay. There's much more focus, and certainly corporates have put a lot of focus on equality, diversity, inclusion. And unfortunately, that's following the Black Lives Movement matter and the tragic death of George Floyd. But I would argue that there was that focus anyway on how did you drive equality, diversity, and inclusion. It might not have been quite as well described, and there wasn't quite so much of a burning platform now as there was before. But I think there's been that focus for many years. I mean, look at all the reporting on pay gender gaps. I mean, look, this is just the right thing to do. And then you've got other reports, Emma, coming out, like the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, who've highlighted the climate crisis that the world is clearly under now. So, yeah, there are a number of factors out there which are driving all of the component parts of this agenda. I don't think you should try and link them all up, though. I think you don't need to link them. Each one of them is important in their own right. And it's also, I think it's because these are issues that are important to society. You know, everybody kind of takes responsibility. So it's a responsibility for me as a buyer, and it's a responsibility for my organization as well. In fact, you know, many of the chief procurement officers that we talk to are really taking the lead on these issues within their organizations. And that's great to see too, because, you know, so much of this is about the supply chain. And what's really important, and perhaps why we're seeing this focus from procurement, is that if you look at supply chain emissions, for example, I think on average, it's something like 5.5 times greater emissions happen in the supply chain than inside your operation. So if you're not focused on your supply chain and everything that's going on in your supply chain, oh, and look, some of the issues around modern day slavery, you know, that wasn't within Boohoo's business, it was in their supply chain. So everybody's now looking at their supply chain and recognizing they need to take really meaningful actions, and they've got to leverage their purchasing power to do that. And actually, they're finding they need to collaborate with other parties in their supply chain to address these issues, which are important to society too. So yeah, I think everything's come together at the same time, but there are a series of issues which are each important in their own right. Yeah,
absolutely. And we've talked a lot about the opportunities and the the benefit that can be drawn from this. But I want to just talk about kind of what the risks, if there are any indeed, that procurement should really bear in mind. Malcolm, I don't know if you want to go first on that.
Well, I'll start off with my first one, which is one of my hobby horses, and Charlie will remember this from the last time we had a probably conversation about this 3 or 4 years ago. Actually, that wasn't the last time. We talked more recently than that, but I do remember that conversation, Charlie. I just think we need to be cautious about ensuring that the right supplier always gets to work. And it's the whole package of things that really adds value. So you've got to get that balance right. You've got to get the weighting right on scoring a tender. Emma, there is no point choosing a supplier which meets all of the criteria we've been discussing, but can't actually deliver a quality product and service and doesn't deliver value for money. This doesn't need to cost you any more money. Actually, this can very often deliver you better value than what you're getting before. So this is, to me, it's all about and, not or. But it fundamentally, make sure you have a supplier that can deliver against whatever that specification is and is delivering you value.
Imran, do you have anything to add to that? Any risks that procurement people should be cautious of?
Yeah, absolutely. And great point that Malcolm raises there, which is, the organisations do need to sort of stand up on their own, but it's really about levelling the playing field to allow them access. Is probably the key thing. And as a financial organisation, we're highly regulated. More so than most sectors, and more so than most sectors I've been involved in. And as a building society, we're particularly careful because it's our members' money and our members' risk. So that means our pre-onboarding and due diligence on suppliers and the checks we put in place to understand and mitigate the risk of transacting with other organisations are quite extensive, and they can be a challenge for smaller organisations who haven't experienced it before. This is particularly so within, say, the technology spend area, which is our biggest spend area. And it's something we're looking to mitigate through our commitment to the FinTech Pledge, which is a pledge that helps support early stage startups and micro businesses navigate that process with us. So we're looking to take some learnings from there. But I guess the build on that is to think about where, in particular, you would use a social enterprise, or where you would invite a social enterprise to play. So if I use that example of technology being our biggest spend, actually it's going to be very difficult for many social enterprises to win business in that area. But there are other areas on the periphery which are still huge spends for social enterprises where they can get involved. So it's really important for us to do research and only invite social enterprises to bid where there's a genuine opportunity for them to win work. I mean, one of the risks is it becomes a tick box exercise, and no one wants that. That's just counterproductive. So, we don't just invite social enterprises to a tender to fill a quota. No, they can't meet that scale of business that's required. We're looking for real opportunities to make meaningful social impact. And sometimes that means identifying a certain part or a certain part of a service that we'd ask a larger third party to subcontract to a social enterprise. And that can work really nicely. I mean, that the example I gave before about Change Please that we discussed with the coffee, that's actually a subcontractor through our catering provider, Baxter Story. And we've got to that place because of our good relationship with them and them understanding our values of what we expect from the subcontractor base. And interestingly, they then, on the back of that, are providing chocolate from organisations like Divine and tea from NEMI, who also fit within the social enterprise category. So you can see that this can roll and roll if you pick the right categories and ask the right things from the tier ones as well, rather than inviting the social enterprises to everything, which could be quite a risk in terms of time and ability.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess it's not just the right supplier, but the right opportunities for those suppliers. Charlie, tell us a little bit more about the Buy Social Corporate Challenge and some real successful engagement that you've had.
Sure. So I guess the key for us is probably to answer all of those risks that Malcolm and Imran have both highlighted. I think they're absolutely right, by the way, on all of those. I think what we are aiming to achieve through this is consistent long-term supplier relationships. And if you set off with a relationship that isn't going to work because they can't deliver, it's not going to last very long. You're going to drop them very quickly, and that's not going to work for anybody, not least the supplier themselves. So it's not in our interest to set that up. We're trying to grow the sector, not see people kind of win a big contract and then lose it 6 months later. So I think the first thing that we want to do as intermediary is to help to think about how we map supply and demand effectively. So where are the areas, to Imran's point, where you can navigate either through tier ones or directly through areas where there's good density of strong social enterprises that are delivering well. We've got a network of, as I mentioned, of 27 businesses who are partners on the challenge now. That means we know where social enterprises are working really well with other big companies that have similar risk profiles or similar regulations to Imran's point within the financial services sector, and can help to navigate, I guess, that kind of supply and demand piece to help businesses to find where the areas are that they need to start in. I think the other really important thing that we want to do with businesses early on is to manage expectations about this stuff. Having said everything that we've just said about how brilliant this stuff is and transformative it can be, and I believe all of that stuff, it's also not that you're going to be changing, 20% of your supplier base over 5 years. It's not that sort of initiative. This is about looking at small tactical changes, potentially at tier 2 or further down the supply chain, that can have an impact, that can create behaviour change, and can hopefully lead to more business and more change. And as I've said, the 160 million pounds that adds up, as you start to build scale around that. But we have had instances where businesses have been very, very excited and have gone in thinking, right, we're going to kind of change everything, and it just doesn't work quite that way. So I think having an ambitious but measured approach to how do we kind of drive this through the business, how do we make sure that it's sustainable in how we build it and develop it, and how are we both thinking about not just what we buy and where we buy it and where our big spend is, but also how does that graft onto the supplier base in terms of where social enterprise is strong. Having said that there's 100,000 and then they're in every area of the economy, they are, but not at every scale, not in every geography. Nationwide, obviously you have big offices in Swindon, you have a certain geographical footprint, and certain things need to be close to there, otherwise you're probably not going to buy from them. Other things can be anywhere. All of these things need to be taken into account when looking at how to find the right suppliers and make that right match, that then helps to create good long-lasting relationships. Because, as I say, without that, the whole thing breaks down. And I think that's particularly important early on. So when we onboard a new business that we're working with, a big thing for us is about how do we make sure that initial experience is very strong, that they work with good, credible suppliers and build momentum. The last thing you want is to say, oh, social enterprise are really exciting, and then the first relationship they have doesn't work because it's untested or someone that they've not worked with in the past. So I think all of those things kind of help to make sure that we're both kind of mitigating some of those risks, but also kind of maximizing the kind of opportunity and upside to look at how we kind of really grow that for the long term, which is absolutely the interest of the social enterprises as well as in the interest of the businesses that we're working with.
Excellent, thank you. Kind of one last thing from each of you, I guess. Malcolm, one from you. What role do you think SIPs can play in supporting CPOs in advancing this agenda?
Well, Emma, SIPs is all about ensuring that the profession has the people of the right capability. Our whole raison d'etre is building capability. So I think before I answer that, I just want to reinforce a little bit of what Charlie and Imran have been saying the last few minutes, because I think there's some incredibly important points there. You do have to choose the right project, or you do have to choose the right supplier when you're really focusing on social value. So this isn't let's try a bit of social value from everybody. And Charlie's point about the perils of getting it wrong, I think incredibly important. I mean, that can be really, really damaging to what is a really important initiative. So I think getting that choice right is key. And then the other bit for me, I think came up from Imran actually, it's almost you need to make this cultural. It needs to be just part of the way you as an organization think. And it may come more naturally to an organization like Nationwide, who are a mutual. But this isn't just about building it in at the contract tender stage, but it's about it's about getting the right culture that you encourage your suppliers to bring ideas to the table, which have got that focus on delivering more social value. And kind of, the contract is the final stage. And there's one really good example, Emma, where there's a company called Foodbuy, who I think were one of our 2020 SIPS award winners. They've done some really creative ways of working with social enterprises or delivering social value. And the great thing I like about it is they sort of linked it to their business. So they work with a supplier called Toast Ale, who are a brewer making beer from waste products. And they divert surplus bread from their organization into Toast Ale, and then they bring back the products from Toast Ale. Or I think they've got another supplier which is wonderfully named Miss Macaroons, who work with long-term unemployed young people to build the confidence and skills they need to become work ready. So they've kind of woven that into their culture. And that really leads on to, I think, what SIPS can do, which is all about having the people with the right skills and the right knowledge. And the SIPS qualifications and technical skills will always sit at the core. You need people with those right basic skills. You then have a different context, and different context which is driven by this focus on issues which are important to society. But as procurement professionals, we must commit to fine-tuning skills and then adapting them to the context that we're in. And whether that's having great analytical skills or developing more soft skills in terms of how do you work better with your partners internally and externally. And in fact, every time we do a global salary survey, every year it comes through more and more that people are looking for people that have got those softer skills in addition to those hard technical skills. And we've got lots of guidance, lots of learning to support members with these skills, whether they're technical or whether they're soft skills. And our qualifications, and indeed the SIPS global standard, we're constantly evolving that, and evolving it to reflect the changes in the environment that we're all operating in. We launched the SIPS chartered status for that very reason. We've got to continue to adapt and learn throughout the whole of our career, and we want to be the professional partner for life for people that work with inside procurement and supply, and things like CPD, continuing professional development, the ethics test. Those are really important as well. So I think we've adapted and flexed a tremendous amount at SIPS, but particularly in the last 12 to 18 months. We've stood up this new intelligence hub, which ensures you get the most relevant up-to-date information. We refresh it every week with what are the most pertinent issues. A lot of focus on building resilience, leading, influencing more technical topics, contract, category management, and a focus on things like equality, diversity and inclusion, and on things like sustainability and social procurement. So these are absolutely things which are on the top of the agenda, and we're there to support the profession.
Excellent, thanks for that. And Imran, what would your last piece of advice be for procurement professionals who are looking to embark in projects like this? Where would you say they should start?
Gosh, I think the first thing is it takes time, right? So this, it's not something that can be rushed. You build it over time. I mean, we've made a great start, but recognise there's more to do, and it requires real commitment and resource and backing to embed the social procurement within the organisation, but it's worth it in the end. And some of the things that Malcolm spoke about there in terms of equipping our procurement future leaders to be able to go and have these conversations, to have some of those softer skills, because it requires that sometimes. This is a sell as well within the organisation. So being able to talk about social enterprises, the diversity agenda, sustainability agenda, the things which are sort of weren't traditionally within the procurement lexicon, to be able to confidently talk about that with stakeholders and build that business case is part of the journey. I mean, the other big bit of advice I'd say is work with an organisation like Social Enterprise UK, to navigate the market and identify appropriate opportunities for your business. There are lots of social enterprise in the facilities, hospitality and people space. So perhaps start there, identify your spend, work with someone like Social Enterprise, and target some of the areas to go after and make some inroads, get some good examples that you can talk to the business about. And make sure the organisation is engaged and bought in. It's not just a procurement agenda. I mean, we've spoken about obviously the procurement teams leading on it, but it's important that it's connected to the purpose and the values of the wider organisation. So getting the stakeholders across the business to be supportive, communicating on that value, and generate some excitement and engagement around it. Most people I found when you talk to them, they want to get involved and they want to do something, particularly when you've helped someone's life by choosing a good or service. And I guess the very final piece is build it into your scorecard or your measuring suite. So we've added it into our procurement for mutual good suite of measures, which includes things on climate, modern slavery, diversity, and this is part of it. And we track it. We've made a commitment this year to increase by 10% the number of social enterprises we engage with. But it becomes a balanced scorecard then for you as a procurement organisation to work to, where, in fact, I'm going to say it for the first time, we haven't spoken about it at all in this podcast. Cost reduction and cost is just one thing that's on there, along with these other measures, and that's what the organisation gets behind.
Emma,
Excellent.
can I just wholeheartedly support what Imran has said about Social Enterprise UK? Because I do think Charlie and the team have got some really good insights and some really good experience that for organisations that aren't well versed in this agenda, aren't well versed in this focus, then there's no place better to go as your first point of contact than Social Enterprise UK.
Yeah.
Excellent. And Charlie, I'll let you have the last word then. So what's next on the agenda for Social Enterprise UK, and how can people get involved?
I'm still struggling with the compliments I've had from Imran and Malcolm to go with something else. No, yes, thank you both. For us, really, it's about, firstly, kind of continuing to grow the initiative in the UK, continue to work with more partners to grow the supplier base, to build momentum. We're increasingly also looking at how we roll this out internationally. So a number of the businesses we're working with in the UK, their procurement approach is EMEA-wide, global, various things. It actually is harder for them to do it UK only. We have a small pilot project at the moment working with Zurich and Compass and Johnson & Johnson and SAP to look at how we kind of look at this across Europe. That's likely to involve, from a social enterprise perspective, other social enterprise partners alongside Social Enterprise UK. I'm also on the board of the Social Enterprise World Forum that's in kind of 75 countries and working globally. There is a global movement around social enterprise that we're all very, very proud to be part of. But how do we kind of really start to grow this? We think it's a fantastic initiative, and we think there's real potential for companies and also for the social enterprise sector. What's hugely important is having a willing buyer as well as being willing suppliers, and we've definitely got that at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Malcolm, Charlie, Imran, thank you very much indeed for your insights today. And thanks for listening. We'll pop some links into the comments below so you can find out much more about Social Enterprise UK and some valuable resources here at SIPS. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.